And we welcome you to the week-ending edition, the news-making edition of AFA Today on AFR Talk. Kevin McCullough from the belly of the news beast, New York City, in the shadow of the Freedom Tower, just north of Trinity Church. And I got to tell you, friends, we have seen a lot of action in the last 24 hours on issues of faith, issues of expression of faith, issues of protest over expressions of faith. And I'm not just talking about the CEO at Mozilla stepping aside. There's been a lot of other things that have happened, too. Kevin McCullough is my name. My phone number is 888-589-8840. So glad to have you with us. My email address, kmcradio@gmail.com. And always honored to have you here. Yesterday, the news came down mid-afternoon, and it was like an absolute gut punch to the church community in the New York City area, a place where a lot of people, to be candid with you, don't often believe has that many Christians living in it. But the truth is, it's a very packed region with churches. In fact, there are approximately 8,000 churches in the New York City area, and a number of those have for a number of years been dependent upon, because space is at such an absolute maximum, especially if you're in the five boroughs of the city proper. It's people on top of people on top of people, and so what you have is this real need for churches to have a place to gather together. And there's only a handful of churches that have the ability to afford a large meeting space. A lot of those 8,000 churches in New York City are storefronts. They meet in local homes. They meet in other areas. Some of them have had the opportunity, several dozen, several hundred at times, as many as close to 1,000 at one point, but many of them meeting on public school property, in classrooms, in auditoriums, because they can afford rent for one day a week to go and pay for 3 hours of use, but they cannot afford a full-time facility. Well, today, a metro-wide gathering of pastors came together on the steps of City Hall to ask the mayor to do something. Now, this is how odd this is. It was a federal court that upheld New York City's ban on religious school use, religious services in public schools. Here's what happened. During the Bloomberg years, people, some atheists and others, were very upset. And they said, hey, it's not fair that these Christians are using public school. That's a separation of church and state issue, which is laughable. It's sad that they go to such lengths to be dishonest, but that's what they started complaining about. So Mayor Bloomberg, who did not know who he was or what he believed ever, he was a Republican, and then he was a Democrat, and then he was an independent, and he didn't know what he believed, and at the end he was just a nanny, telling you how much soda you could drink, everything else. He kicked all the churches out of the public schools. And he was being consistent, fighting on the side of these people that have been trying to make this happen for nearly 20 years. These atheist groups have been after this for about 20 years. And so he just laid down the law. He said, this is going to become the policy of the education department. At which point the churches said, no, we've got to have a place to meet. And so for the last 3 years, there's been this real intense battle. And today, some pastors from across the New York area came together, and I just wanted you to hear some sound bites from at least a couple of them. This man's name is Pastor Dimas Salaberios. Now, he pastors a church in the Bronx. I think they use a public school facility, and he also has recently assumed the helm of the New York City metro area presidency of Concerts of Prayer. But this is what he said on the steps of City Hall moments ago.
How you doing? I'm Pastor Dimas Salaberios, and I think this whole situation is deplorable, and I think that the judges are feckless in their decision to go against the churches meeting in public spaces. I believe that these judges may have never even visited one of these churches, and they believe just because we rent a space for 3 hours that all church business is transforming the school into something that it's not. So we're standing here, right now. I know our mayor in New York City, Mayor DeBlasio, marched with us for this cause and weather just like this. And I've stood with us and given talks about how churches need to be allowed to have these type of gatherings inside schools and other public space like community centers.
And you're hopeful that he will again.
And we are prayerful and hopeful that he will stand behind his word and allow the churches to continue to meet. Otherwise, in New York City, this would be about 16,000 Christians ousted in 2 weeks from now with no place to worship. And
now, imagine that, friends. I want you to imagine that 16,000 people all of a sudden just out of a place to worship. They don't have the opportunity to be there anymore, to do anything like they've been doing for years and years and years. That's Pastor Dimas Salaberios. There are others I'll allow you to hear from during the hour. But here's what's very interesting about this, friends, and it's one of the reasons why, as believers, you don't really ever want to be totally in any one political camp. Because Mayor Michael Bloomberg was a Republican, and then he was a Democrat, and then he was an independent. And if you were a Bloombergian, you saw these policies range all over the place, and didn't matter what political party he was from. It was all messed up. Now, Mayor DeBlasio has been equally bad, horrifically bad. For instance, on the issue of crisis pregnancy centers, he's actively trying to kick crisis pregnancy centers out of the city. But the one solid thing that he has done, and he's a Bolshevik. I mean, this guy, his economic policies are bad. I don't agree with this guy on anything. But for whatever reason, before he took office, while he was campaigning, he came to many of these pastors' aid and he said, listen, this isn't right. If churches are paying the same amount of rent, if they are following the same rules, if they are helping us in the community and doing other things that are necessary, he said, I just want everybody to know that I don't support this idea that they can't have access over this false claim that somehow in having the church participate in the community by holding services at your local public school, that you're going to infect the schools there with a degree of religion. And it's a further example of how just messed up this whole argument about the separation of church and state is. The separation of church and state, number one, is not a constitutional idea. That doesn't come from the Constitution. It doesn't even come from a founding document. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the Constitution. The Constitution teaches that there shall be no encumbrance to one practicing one's faith, that the state will not establish a faith. It will not dictate to faith-based people what they are to believe. It will not establish a statewide church that you have to be belonging to, et cetera, et cetera. That's what the First Amendment guarantees in its protection of religious expression. The idea of separation of church and state came from a letter later. It wasn't even a part of the founding documents, and the only definition of that is constitutionally valid is that the church is allowed to be involved in the government. We are allowed as faith-based people to run for office and to campaign and to heartily endorse positions and things that we believe in. What they are not allowed to do is have the government dictate to the church what it must do. And it's been so perverted over the last number of decades. And now it's rearing its head into the very operation of the church itself, people making this observation. Now, not only is this court doing that, and the atheists that are on the City Council of New York doing that, not only are they preventing the 16,000 believers from gathering for worship in about 2 weeks, they are also hurting the poor. We're going to hear from Pastor Rick Del Rio in just a second. But I want to say one last thing about DeBlasio. I oppose him on everything that he should be opposed on. But when I ask people to let the mayor of New York know that they want him to keep his promise to the churches, I think that's a good thing. See, it's not enough to curse the darkness. You have to give them a pat on the back when they do something right as well. And so if he's willing to stand with the pastors, if he's willing to stand up to persecutionist bullies that want to kick churches to the side and say, nope, we're going to treat you as second-class citizens. Yeah, you're willing to pay the rent for the school. You're willing to do the cleanup. You're willing to follow all the rules, but we're just not going to let you access the room because you happen to be a group of people that believe something. Friends, that's discrimination. That is patent religious discrimination. And the Circuit Court of Appeals wasn't even unified in its decision. It was a 2-1 vote. Imagine that. 2 black-robed tyrants telling the body of believers in New York, 16,000 plus worshiping Christians, you can't meet here. You can't meet here because you're a faith-based person. You can't have access to the same room that the Kiwanis Club, the Lions Club, the Boy Scouts, whoever else has those rooms at other times during the week. We're not going to let you have them simply because you believe in God. Well, there's another thing that they're missing here, and that's what Pastor Rick Del Rio of the Lower East Side had to say to me.
You minister in and around New York. The court said yesterday you can't use schools anymore. How does this impact the body of faith here in the city?
Well, first of all, as a pastor in the Lower East Side, I represent a large body of the poor. And I think one of the things that's really taken place is the displacement of the poor from places to be able to worship. The fact is that we live, in my area, we live in a gentrified community. To get something that would fit 150 people would cost $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month. That is prohibitive, which basically means that we as a body and as citizens rely on the fact that we are taxpayers and we can actually pay rent just like every other organization pays rent to use us. They're not giving us anything. We pay, and however, it's almost it's really the fruit of us working in the community. We provide all kinds of services and mentoring and kids. We work with the young people, with the children, with the homes, and when anything happens in our community, I serve also as a clergy liaison for the police department. So when there's strife in the community, we serve. All we want to do is be able to worship our God and have a place that we can congregate, just like everybody else, especially those that have finances that can have a church building. Well, we don't have the finances, but we can actually use a public space by paying that rent. So we're asking Mayor DeBlasio, who's been a friend to us and has stood with us throughout these last few years as we battled with City Hall, we're asking him to stay true to his word. We appreciate the efforts that he has made, and we know that he's going to do the right thing. So we're going to continue to pray, and we're here today to thank him for all of his efforts, but also to challenge him to meet that commitment that he made to us as a people.
And it's interesting because what you're hearing is every pastor say that they're confident that the mayor's going to do the right thing. But I ask each of them in a follow-up, are you concerned that he might not? And the universal answer is, Kevin, anytime you have a pastor that is relying on a promise from a politician, you have reason to be afraid. You have reason to be concerned that they may not follow through on the promises that they made. And, of course, DeBlasio got elected by coalescing a lot of different groups together. Imagine one that is supporting churches to have the opportunity to worship as congregations on public property, but kicking crisis pregnancy centers out the door simultaneously. I mean, it's a very mixed-up world in this mayor's head, and not one that I actually want to spend a lot of time trying to understand. But at the end of the day, that's where we're at, and that's what we're dealing with. And so that's just a taste of a couple of the pastors that were there. But here's what's going to happen. If they can make it work, the mayor will need to issue a new policy directive that would then basically be in direct opposition to the many city council members that have been on the other side of this. If they make that, there's a likelihood that the city council will take the city back to court. This is far from settled, but if you want to help encourage the mayor of New York City to do the right thing, I'll come back with a number for you that you can call the mayor's office in New York and just tell him you're with him, you want him to do the right thing on this, you believe that he will. Anyway, Kevin McCullough, religious freedom is under attack, and on AFA Today on AFR Talk, we will demonstrate some more in the last 24 hours how that's true. Coming up, stay with us.